Now, a bad start to the academic year for some university students as they are without a place to sleep. The accommodation crisis is reportedly as a result of delays in NSFAS payments and a shortage of student accommodation. Mzansi has demanded that the Higher Education Minister, Dr. Blade Nzimande, urgently address the issue. The political party says it visited one of the affected institutions and it paints a bleak picture of what the situation is where they visited. Let's talk to them now, and Lawrence Manaka is from Mzansi Youth and Student Chapters. Mr. Manaka, good evening to you and thank you for your time. Right now, Stellenbosch University, the crisis of accommodation there is in the news. Tell us about the institution you visited and what you found.
Good evening, Collie, and thank you so much for having me on your show, and a good evening as well to your listeners as well. Well, Collie, sometime last week we were at CPUT, where we had essentially had that students are actually without, like any sort of sleeping accommodations. So we made our way to CPUT as Mzansi to just try and investigate the situation and just to try and understand what could be the problem or the hold up essentially, like with students, getting accommodation. The whole idea is that every year when, institutions have to open, our understanding is that the minister has to actually give us a state of readiness of some sort and be able to indicate if, the universities are able to receive students, and I think this is also done in conjunction with the different institutions. And when we went to CPUT, we found that at least 260 students were actually left stranded at CPUT, literally outside the institution, and it actually went as far as those 260 students actually being kicked out of the places that I was sleeping at, which is the student center, which is not safe or even conducive, and they had to sleep outside for a day also. And as Mzansi, we tried our level best to just engage the management and to try and find an amicable solution that could be brought forth to ensure that those students have some sort of accommodation that is dignified.
Yeah, and the picture you paint is similarly what is being reported at Stellenbosch. Students sleeping in halls that are not meant to accommodate them for long enough. But I think even more depressing are reports suggesting that some of them are saying because they have not had a decent shower in 2 weeks, they're actually even afraid to attend classes. But to add to that, they don't want to report at their homes because parents are going to worry because they may just suggest that they come back home. What have you heard from the Minister of Higher Education about efforts to try and resolve this?
Look, so far we've not had anything essentially that is constructive in terms of trying to address the crisis that is currently happening. And, just to the picture that you are painting right now, what is more worrying was that as soon as the CPUT situation seemed to have come down, we actually went into UWC rather, which is just right across CPUT, and we found that there was actually just a similar problem, right? So we believe that, so outside of us believing, we've not had anything tangible from the minister to try and address the crisis that students are facing. As we're speaking right now, the protest that is happening at, at TUT, and this is also related to NSFAS, because the CPUT situation was not just speaking essentially to the accommodation crisis, but the accommodation crisis is formed in conjunction with the institution not being ready, but also NSFAS having taken, the accreditation into their own hands, and private, accommodations that were meant to be allocated to students were then not allocated to students. So the minister has not painted any picture that is showing us what is the state of readiness when it comes to these institutions, and we've not had any response. In fact, it will look like the minister is then trying to downplay essentially the state of readiness and is trying to downplay what is essentially happening in the different institutions. And this to us as Mzansi seems like, and it is, and we believe that it's a lack of political will, and this is why we continue to say that we need new leaders.
Part of what appears to be a recurring response, or at least the complaint, is that this is in part as a result of the monies that are owed to students dating back to last year, never mind the current academic year, of 2024. What is going to be the solution to this, Lawrence? Because if there isn't a solution, this matter is possibly close to reaching boiling point.
Yes, Tolly. Look, I believe that the matter has already reached, boiling points. Because, look, disruptions are already starting to happen across different and various institutions across the country, right? And I believe that the solution is for the big fintech companies, essentially, because we know that they were not accredited to even do the job, to actually be replaced. And I think, look, we've seen the department and the minister and NSFAS itself stalling this process because, look, I think from November until now, they've had a lot of time to try and find a different service provider that will come and clean up the mess. And this is why, as Rise Mzansi, we continue to say that this is actually a lack of leadership, and it's actually a leadership crisis, and we then need new leaders. So if the big companies, the big four companies that are currently doing the job are not changed, I think what we're going to be seeing is a lot of disruptions across the country. Also, given the fact that it's election year, we'll see a lot of young people who want to voice out and who are actually going to use this moment to try and show that they're actually not being heard by this government of ours, right? So I believe that what needs to be done is to change this, to change this big four. But more than anything, just to ensure that we safe-proof this schooling system, and particularly the higher schooling system, we need a change in the political leadership that we have. And this is why we continue to invite a lot of young people to rise. Young people across different institutions are affected by so many problems, that many of which come with NSFAS. By November last year, 11,000 students were not, their fees were not paid by that time. By November, this means that the entire year they had nothing, that they did not have any sort of food. Some were lucky to get accommodation. And this is something that cannot continue to go on. That's why I'm saying that this has actually reached a boiling point. So it's important that we get rid of the political establishment that we currently have. But for the meanwhile, what needs to happen before we go to the polls is that the big four companies that are currently servicing NSFAS and are doing any justice to students must then be removed in order for this system to be able to operate properly. And we are calling on NSFAS to actually also stop, experimenting with students, because when you're saying that you're going to be taking accrediting of residencies into your own hands, you must have a system that is bulletproof. You must have a system that that is going to that is not going to let students suffer. Because currently what we're seeing is that NSFAS and the Department of Education, of Higher Education, that is supposed to be overseeing the whole process and ensuring accountability, are ensuring that students continue to suffer under their hands. And this is why, as Rise Mzansi once more, we're saying that we need new leaders, and young people, particularly those in institutions of higher learning who are affected by this and those in solidarity, must go and vote for an establishment that is going to safeguard and safe-proof their future.
Lawrence Manaka is from the Rise Mzansi Youth and Student Chapters. Thank you very much for your time.